Hey good people, Brian here, and after discussions around the Enlightenment, something weird was happening in Europe. Like, super weird. All of a sudden, there was this belief that all of that equality talk actually extended to women. I know, right? What the heck? The expectation for the time was that women are meant to cook, clean, and have children. I mean, that's what they've always done, right? What is this nonsense? Even the enlightened philosopher Rousseau said that while boys should have well-rounded, rigorous education, girls should be taught to be a helper to men. So what gives? So obviously, it isn't the view of myself or MiaPrep that girls should be limited in anything they choose to do. What I was doing at the beginning there is using a literary device called satire. Satire is using irony, exaggeration, or sarcasm to ridicule a point of view or idea. In making it seem like the idea of women learning was strange, I made fun of that idea through sarcasm because it's ludicrous. Truthfully, women of the 18th century faced a locked door at almost all institutions of learning. They desired to be informed about the world, had contributions to make, and wanted to have an equal place in the conversation. So where would a woman turn at this time? Enter salons and coffee houses. Today, we'll answer these questions. What were salons and coffee houses, and how did they provide a place for women to contribute to the Enlightenment? Who were the influential women thinkers that drove the Enlightenment, and what did they contribute? What role did satire play in critiquing the society of the 18th century? And a bigger question for you to ponder, what inferences can you make about a society that is free to critique its government? In your extension activity for World of New Ideas, you learned a little about the rise of coffee and tea and their importance in driving the Enlightenment forward. Called salons in France and coffee houses in England, these gathering places were the premier spots for people to mingle and talk about the ideas of the day, from the Bill of Rights in England to Voltaire's newest satirical play. And most of these establishments were run by, that's right, women. Before I tell you why, I want you to pause here, head to your lesson guide, and make a guess as to why most of these salons and coffee houses were woman-run. The thinkers of the Enlightenment that we've been talking about, from Locke to Rousseau, were considered some of the smartest and most progressive thinkers of all time, summed up by the philosopher Immanuel Kant as those who sapere aude, or dare to know. But when it came to equality and women, Enlightenment went right out the window. Most took the stance that women should be educated for the role society intended for them to fill and discouraged the reading of novels. In a word, super chauvinistic. Because these establishments were open to all, people and their ideas could mingle freely, and women wouldn't have been called out for attending as they owned the place and often drove the debate on a topic of the day. These places of free thinking, free mingling, and the free sharing of ideas had no barriers and thus became the stage for ladies to greatly influence their country and the world. Briefly return to your lesson guide and revisit your guess as to why most of these places were women-run. Add what you've learned. Diving into the heavy hitters of the Enlightenment, let's start with some of the operators of these famous idea incubators. Running what was perhaps the most influential salon in France, Marie-Thérèse Geoffrin not only hosted the wives of many of the highest ministers of France, but also financed the Encyclopedia, a publication by Denis Diderot which included a collection of the newest Enlightenment ideas of the day. Even though the encyclopedia was denounced as sedition and held up in the courts for many reasons, Geoffrin continually supported it. The book and her salon continued to be a go-to for new thought and a critique of society. Cézanne was the wife of Louis XIV's highly influential finance minister Jacques Necker, many believing that it was she who maneuvered him into that position. From her salon in Paris, she hosted the wives of many influential intendants, most likely using her influence to steer the course of the French Empire. Elizabeth Adkins, known as Moll King, ran the most famous or infamous coffee house in London. Unlike the French salons, which were usually in private residences, English coffee houses were public businesses where rich, poor, law-abiding, and not-so-law-abiding individuals would rub shoulders. Moll King's coffee house was a meeting place for everyone from incognito nobles to prostitutes to barristers or lawyers. Goods, services, and ideas of all kinds were traded through this late-night bawdy establishment. Before we move on, head to your lesson guide and answer this question. Are there any establishments in your life similar to the salons and coffee houses of the 18th century? From proprietors to frequenters, let's shift to some of the most important women thinkers of the Enlightenment. Mary Astell was not someone you'd want to get into a debate with, because you'd lose. Using the arguments of the Enlightenment, namely that all people are born equal and that monarchs aren't necessary, she applied these to the life of women. If all men are born free, then so are women, and they shouldn't be treated as slaves for men. If there should be no monarchy of the state, then why should there be monarchy at home? In her 1694 book, A Serious Proposal to the Ladies, Astell writes that women are oppressed by both poor education and customs of the time. She espouses institutes of learning only for women, which would allow them to educate themselves and to grow their own cultural identity. Known widely as the first feminist, Mary's book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, argues against Rousseau's assertion that women's education is second to men's. Women should be educated to increase their own utility in society, including entry into male-dominated fields such as medicine and law. Not for nothing, her inspiration spread to her daughter, Mary Shelley, who would write Frankenstein, the first horror novel ever. Emily was trained in math and science to the point that it was she who translated Isaac Newton's work, The Principia, from Latin, many scientists wrote in Latin at the time, into French. Her translation made Newton's laws of motion approachable for the common French person and spurred an interest in science. Whether or not many of the ideas you've heard about today are popular now, remember we're still in the age of absolute monarchs, and some of these ideas didn't go over well with the powers that be. So how do we get our point across while still managing not to be thrown into the dungeon? Satire, of course. Satirists were talking to that strange audience of thinkers with many enlightened ideas who still, at the end of the day, may be holding on to some more traditional thoughts as well. Satire may be everywhere now, but it was a new concept during the Enlightenment as a way to poke fun, have a bit of a laugh, and also make an important societal point. How'd it work? Well, let's look at a couple of really famous examples, shall we? Eliza Haywood's Fantomina, or Love in a Maze, was a 1725 work questioning gender roles in society by having the heroine of the story dress as 4 different women and discussing the different ways in which the same man interacted with her. Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal is the mother of all satirical works. Swift, an Irishman, wanted to comment on the horrific treatment of Irish people by the British Crown. His booklet proposes that Irish people sell their children for the consumption of wealthy English people for profit. Swift's booklet was written in an entirely serious tone, as if to force the common English person to consider that the treatment of the Irish was so bad that they might as well start eating their children, because why not? Take a look at this oil painting. Head to your lesson guide and jot down a couple of observations. As a hint, this is supposed to be showing something satirical. William Hogarth's 1757 cartoon Canvassing for Votes depicts a politician shamelessly flirting with women while his supporters bribe people for their votes. While somewhat obvious, the point on moral and political corruption in England is still pretty biting. Where have you seen examples of satire like this today? Answer in your lesson guide. While progress is messy and slow, we can definitely see the beginnings of modern thought and modern roles for all people taking shape. Where do we go next? Given all the explosiveness of these ideas, it'll be pretty revolutionary. Don't forget to check out the extension activity to learn how to write a bit of your own satire, and remember that history is everywhere.